Hi you guys, welcome back. My name is Carrie Penny. I am the Happy Crafty Homemaker, and today I'm kind of going to do a no need to buy kind of video. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to call this as of yet, but everybody kind of lost their cookies recently with the new launches from Joann's. So we had the Big Twist Rave and the Big Twist Prism yarns that released. And I'm not saying don't buy these yarns, but if you are wanting to get the same effect but use things that have been in your stash for a while, what in my stash is similar to these yarns? So first off, we'll start with the Prism yarn. So this is 100% acrylic. This is a size 4. This cake is 7 ounces, 200 grams. And this is, I bought 2 of these. I was originally planning on actually reviewing these yarns. However, I realized I have a lot of stuff in my stash that is very similar. So I actually get 2 cakes of the Prism and 2 cakes of the Rave. And I realized there really wasn't a huge need for me to review this yarn because I actually have things in my stash that are 2, 3, 4, 10 years old that are very, very similar. So if you do not have a multi-generational stash, don't worry about it. This yarn's great if that's what you want to work with. If you do have a multi-generational stash and you have things that have been kind of languishing, might I recommend some of these other yarns that are very similar? And for one of these, I do have a recommendation for you UK peeps out of my stash. So bear in mind, these are only the ones actively currently in my stash that are similar, maybe not identical. I actually have one other one I want to grab. So I totally forgot I had meant to grab this off my wall as one of these options here, but let's go. So we're going to start off here with the Prism yarn. So one of the things that's kind of unique about this Prism yarn, so it is 2 different color strands that are twisted together. Now this does have a very sheeny nylon look to it. Let's see if I can get one of the pink and very distinct pink and blue strands up here. I mean, you can see it's even hard for the camera to kind of catch that with the sheen on the yarn, but it's a fairly girthy ply. The 2 plies are fairly girthy and fluffy. For a size 4 yarn, this is actually fairly plump. It's very, very soft to the touch. It is a very nice feeling yarn. I think this would be beautiful crocheted. I do worry is the plies don't seem to be very sticky and they're not sticking together 100%. I would be a little worried you might see some splitting if you go into the twist instead of against the twist as you crochet it. But all in all, I think this is a pretty yarn. There's nothing at all wrong with this yarn. But in my stash, I did this like I do my Yarnable and my ALC comparisons or what goes with this things. This was something where I just literally took 2 seconds walking through the room real quick and grabbed things. Hence why I forgot to grab what I'm going to show you first. So this is Coffee Shop from Premier. And this is actually kind of in between both of these yarns in a way. You can see this is a 2-ply yarn. You can see that there are different plies in there, but they're almost felted together. So they're sticky. They're not felted, but they're sticky. So this one is a size 3 yarn. This is a little bit finer of a yarn. So if you're looking to get a very similar texture and appearance as you have with the Prism. Coffee shop might not be a bad choice. And this one is also part wool, I believe. Yeah, it is 85% acrylic, 15% wool, and this is a 100-gram cake. So if you have this in your stash and you're looking for something maybe a little bit finer but similar, but this is also very similar to the Prism yarn. We'll get a little bit more into what type of yarn this is in a second, but in the visual effect of this yarn, it is also very, very similar to the Prism. So these two yarns as individual strands look wildly different from each other, mostly because this is two rovings that have been plied together. So this is a 2-ply yarn, whereas the Rave is more of a single ply, almost roving style yarn. So they're very, very similar. It's like two Raves make one strand of Prism, except the Rave is also a size 4. Anyway, another thing that would give you a very, very similar, slightly softer blended effect would be if you've got Red Heart Roll With It tweed in your stash. So once again, we do have, this is a little bit more sticky. The individual plies are a little bit more sticky as they phase through. It is a little bit more subtle in this one. However, this did come in some slightly more bold colors. So this one, I believe, is a 3-ply. Yes. So this is a 3-ply yarn, not a 2-ply. So you get a little bit more color potential as you're working through it. It's not going to give you slightly that more bubbled-ish texture between the plies, because once again, the plies on this are a little bit more sticky. They're sticking together a little bit better. It's not that much more twisted though. So it's not going to give you that hyper ropey feel or look. It's going to be more diffused and blended than a lot of other yarns. Oh, I should have maybe filmed this as like 2 videos and put them together so I didn't have so many yarns sitting here toppling over. So the next one, if you have this in your stash, I know a lot of you guys who have been with me for the last 5 years will be very familiar with the Premier Candy Shop yarn. They do occasionally still seem to have like 3 skein bundles of this and one of the sweet roll that will pop up on the website, the standard old sweet rolls, where it's like they found a box that had the 3-pack still in them. But this is a little bit more of that bubbly effect between the 2 plies. This is a little bit more loosely spun than the other ones I have shared so far. This did come in a huge variety of colors. This is actually one of my least diverse color schemes of this, but it was the easiest one for me to pull off the shelf because they're kind of packed in there fairly tightly top to bottom. But this does have like the color gradation. It kind of creates faux striping effects as you work with it, but they're not a repeating pattern even within the same dye lot. So very similar to this. And if you look at them side by side, they look extremely similar. So if you were eyeballing this, but you already have this in your stash, and this would be a color that you would want to work with, this is actually very, very similar to one of the old Premier Candy Shops. So it's, even the colors seem to be kind of what we've seen before. Now moving up to some size 5 yarn options. Like I said, this Prism is very plump. It's not a super fine size 4 yarn. Oh, by the way, the Candy Shop is a size 4. Yeah. So 2 other options that are on the finer side of size 5, but still they are shared or shown as being size 5 yarns. This one, I believe, is still available, or some variation of it is available. This is Woolcraft Pebble. And once again, this one is 100% acrylic. All the ones I've shown you are acrylic except for that coffee shop one. So this has that bobbledy effect in the yarn. It is still a 2-ply yarn. And it's going to give you a very, very, very similar texture. This is another skein of it that I have here. So it's going to give a very, very similar look as you work it up. Because these are in skeins, you can't see the striping effect that does exist within a lot of these. If they'd been caked instead of skeined. And I believe these are 200 grams as well. Machine wash, acrylic. This is, oh, Pebble Chunky 200 grams. It says right there, 200 grams. Pebble Chunky. So those would be some options there. If you are in the UK, you can much more easily access that than most of us Americans. We would have to pay for the shipping. However, in our stash here, a lot of us bought up a whole bunch of Barcelona a couple years ago. I think that was 3 years ago when Michael's had that really good sale where the Barcelona yarn was like $1.25, $1.50 a skein. This is 2019. So yeah, 4.5, 5 years ago. This is listed as a number 5, but once again, this is pretty thin for a number 5. Especially when you compare it to the plumpness of this as a number 4. Once again, it's a 2-ply. It has a kind of striping effect you can see here. Many of them have a very similar kind of striping effect within them. Not all of them, some of them. But that would be something else that a lot of us I know bought a whole bunch of a couple years ago, and still a lot of us have some of this in our stash. Once again, I'd like to remind you, this is not to say don't buy these new yarns. This is if you're interested and you're in a low buy, if you're interested but you don't really want to jump in, if you're interested but these are some other options you could use. Not saying there's anything wrong with Rave and Prism yarns. Just want to make that clear. This is just an FYI. These are similar twos. So that is all I have for the Prism. I'm going to pause this real quick and put these yarns up. That way I'm not tripping all over them. Be right back. Okay. So the whole thing that kicked this off to begin with was when I got the Prism and immediately looked at it. Immediately I was like, oh, this is identical to Candy Shop. This looks just like Candy Shop. So that's kind of my motivation in doing this is as soon as I had these in my hands, I realized, oh, wait, I have something like this here. So, the next, we have Big Twist Rave. So this is another size 4 yarn. This is 312 yards, 5.3 ounces, 285 meters, 150 grams, 100% premium acrylic. Rave is a whole bunch of neons paired with black. So that's kind of all you're getting as far as the colors go. Once again, nothing wrong with that. Right in my wheelhouse. Obviously, I chose the pink. Multiple different color options. But I've said this before, I love single ply roving yarns. They tend to pill very quickly for things like garments, but they make beautiful shawls, scarves, and hats. Things where you're not constantly rubbing on them or rubbing up against them. Actually, another one that would work. So we're going to start here with Scarfy. And this is another one where I know we all bought a ton of this when this went on clearances. Because a lot of these went on clearance for like $2.50. They were originally $10. I think now they're up to $12. But once again, this is a single ply roving. This color fades into a bunch of different colors. I have had one that was more stripey. Actually, the one on the picture here is a little bit more stripey, faded stripes. But this is another one where I know we all have a whole bunch of this in our stash. So this is a very fine size 5. It's got a lot of air in it. And this one is 78% acrylic, 22% wool. Once again, I still probably wouldn't do sweaters with this. I would still, you know, stick to scarves, hats, things like that, as this is very fluffy and this will pill very heavily. And since I just pulled that off right there, I'm just going to slide it right back in. If you are an oldie goldie, many of you guys have, if you've been with me, you will be aware of this just because I used to talk about it a lot, but it is a long since discontinued yarn. You can see I purchased mine for 97 cents a skein at Joann's, but I have a bunch that I got from Spinrite before Spinrite stopped shipping to the US for big clearance deals. I paid like 25 cents a skein for a whole bunch of this too. So this was under the Bernat Sheepish, and then this was Vicky Howell Karen Sheepish. But any of these sheepish yarns, once again, these are single ply rovings, size 4. One of them is 70% acrylic, 30% wool. One of them is 100% acrylic. So I guess Bernat's 100% acrylic. Karen has 30% wool in it. So if you have a very old stash of yarn, you very well might have some of this. Now this was discontinued forever and 3 years ago. You can see the production date on this was 2013. So this is already 11 years old. I still have a lot of it because I really do love it. I was really holding on to it and saving it for a special time or occasion. Now we're at the point where that's not quite as important. So it's time to use it, but I will probably be using more of this soon, especially this color because it's so pretty. But this is, once again, a very similar color. This came in stripes. This came in some fading. I did have a lime green and purple that had very similar texture to this, where they fade wrapped into each other like that. This is a little bit finer as well. It's not quite as plump. Again, this is another very plump size 4 yarn. Next, if you're really wanting to get a striped effect or stripe-ish effect, landscapes. I know a number of us have this that we purchased on Uber clearances. Things like when Lion Brand did the $1 a skein, but you had to buy the whole case of it deals. But this is one that has a stripe effect. This one does stripe. Some of them are solid. Some of them are kind of more alternating colors, not really stripes in an order. This is 100% acrylic. And this is also a little bit more on the plump, but this one is more airy, like the scarfy. And last but not least, this is probably the furthest stretch one, but I think would work up the most similar. And this is Red Heart Colorscapes. And I do believe this is another fully discontinued line now. But it's one that came in a whole bunch of subscription kits there for a while. It came in Mary Maxim. It came in something similar to an Annie's. It also came in a blanket quantity of this came in something. But it's a really nice yarn. I never had a problem with the yarn itself. I had a problem with the patterns that I was trying to make with it that never quite worked out. This one is, I think 100%. Yeah, this one is also 100% acrylic. Now this is, while a roving style single ply, it's a little bit more twisted, but you have, because it's fuzzier, it's going to have a little bit less definition, which would give you more of the blur effect you get with this section in here, but it's it's much denser than this. This is very airy and puffy. This is a little bit more dense, but you're going to get a very similar looking fabric, albeit this one is going to feel plumper because of how thick it is. This one's going to feel a little bit squishier because of how aerated this yarn is. So I gave you options out of my stash from the last 11 years of yarns that have been produced that are super duper similar to the Big Twist Prism and the Big Twist Rave. So I hope that you guys found some inspiration. If you have noticed something in your stash that's very similar to one of these, or you know of a yarn that has been very popular recently, like the Lion Brand Mandala, I think it was the original one, or the Lion Brand Mandala Tweed, the one I did not like when I reviewed it, that one, that is very similar to this. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that is super similar that maybe I don't have in my stash, but I know there are others. Like this is too fine to be like homespun. But if you're looking for something to give you that textured effect of homespun that's a little bit more single stitch, not getting the fluffs in your way, like that. Something that gives the effect of like a boucle yarn without giving the difficult to crochet it. This would be a good option. Anything like this would be a good option, especially to crochet. If you're going to be patient with the splitting, I think you would see with this. But if you have other options that you can think of off the top of your head, please leave a comment down below and let everybody else know. Also, if it's something I've worked with, I'll reply and say, oh, it's very similar, or oh, it's like the coffee shop where it's kind of in between the two. Because there are a number of yarns, like the coffee shop, that fall in between these two as well, because these are very similar while styled very differently. So anyway, I love you guys. I will see you all real soon. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Please take care of yourselves. Bye, guys.